Well, good morning. It's so delightful to be here with you all. I'm going to talk about a disease called ME, which is myalgic encephalomyelitis. So I know that's a mouthful, and it's more commonly being called chronic fatigue syndrome. And so this is a story, frankly, about heartbreak and suffering that does not have to be. Do I do the next slide here? Okay. So let me first show a picture and ask, does anyone know who this is? Yeah, okay. Nancy's one of our classmates who started with us with all sorts of energy and intelligence and vibrancy, just as we all did. And I believe Nancy's watching us today online. Hello, Nancy. Has anyone here had lunch with Nancy or seen her in the last 30 years? Well, there are a few, but not many. But let me tell you why. It's because Nancy has myalgic encephalomyelitis, and she's extremely limited by this disease. ME hit Nancy in 1988, almost 30 years ago. She caught the flu, which triggered a moderate case of ME. Not the worst, not the best. But for her, it was like flipping a switch. She went completely foggy in her memory, no ability to process either written or oral information, and she would lose energy very, very quickly. And this is Nancy. Do you remember Nancy, who had run marathons in 1973 and loved to participate in all kinds of sports? But she had to quit her job and has never been able to go back to work. She's, like most ME patients, seen many, many doctors, tried many, many treatments on her own, trial and error. Some work, some don't, most don't. And she has no more, even today, no more than 4 hours of energy per day on a, quote, good day, and also never knows when there'll be a bad day. So Nancy is quite disabled. I can tell you also her spirits are full of grace. But quite disabled and in pain every single day for 30 years. So while we in this room have raised our children, have pursued careers, we've bought homes, we've gone out to dinner with friends, we've skied, we've enjoyed a hike in the woods, we've read books and newspapers, she has been able to do none of that. Our Nancy. And what's surprising is how common this disease is. It's estimated by the Centers for Disease Control that there are 2.4 million Americans with this disease. In fact, I know of one other of our classmates whose child is quite ill with this disease, and likely there are many more. So just a little bit about it. It's a chronic disease. Almost no one recovers from this illness. Nancy's had it for 30 years. And it's not at all unusual. I talk with people in their 70s who've suffered for 50 years and have been in bed. The sickest of the sick with ME have relentless physical pain. They're so sensitive to light and sound that they cover their eyes and cover their ears, and they're really living their lives in a kind of sensory deprivation. They can't process information well enough to watch television or to read books, and they have extreme mental confusion, and of course they also have physical pain. Many cannot leave their beds. And there are so many people who have lived in that condition for decades. But the hallmark symptom of this disease is the utter deprivation of energy, just utter exhaustion. You know, we've all been tired. We've all, worked jobs, had children. This is tiredness of a very different order of magnitude. And by some people who've experienced both many rounds of chemo and this disease absolutely affirm that this disease is more enervating. So, for instance, there's Nick. He's a 13-year-old boy that I talked to last month. I talked to his mother, whose only wish is that he can go to school. He's been out of school for 3 years. And then I spoke at length with the husband of Charlene Dotson, who took her life at age 57. The pain of the disease with 0 treatments or cures available to her was simply too much for her to bear. So, I mean, the question is, why have we not heard of this? You may have heard of chronic fatigue syndrome. And why are there no treatments for patients? Why is that? And I'll tell you, because it is a very complex multi-system disease. Clearly, it involves multiple systems in the body. There's clearly an immune and inflammation element to it. There's clearly a neuroendocrine. There's clear evidence of you can see damage in the brain. And there are clear bioenergetics elements of this disease that make it very, very complex, make the symptoms very different from patient to patient. And so also there are no accepted biomarkers. There's no, one thing where you go to a doctor or even a specialist, even the couple specialists in this disease who exist in the country. There's no blood test. There's no one thing you can do to say, I have diagnosed you now. So it's very difficult to diagnose, and the vast majority of patients are never diagnosed. So you put all that together, and there's ignorance about the disease, there's misunderstanding, and certainly there's stigma, both among the public and among the medical profession. This disease for so long has been dismissively labeled chronic fatigue syndrome. So no wonder it hasn't been taken seriously. Most patients are told that it's all in their head. And what we hear from patients so often is many people who suffer from the stigma of ME are accused of faking being sick, when in fact, they live their lives faking being well. They really do what they can to pretend to be well. So imagine the relief that occurred just this February when the Institute of Medicine, which published this report. And the Institute of Medicine is the most prestigious medical academic organization probably in the world. And they completed it was commissioned by the United States government, HHS, National Institutes of Health, CDC, and completed a rigorous, comprehensive 18-month research study and concluded, 1, this is a devastating physical disease, not psychological. This is not depression. This is a physical disease, like any other physical disease. 2, patients have poorer quality of life on average than those with MS or with a stroke or with diabetes or renal failure or lung disease or HIV or many other illnesses. 3rd, the burden on our economy, all of us as taxpayers, is $24 billion annually. And it's chronic. Almost no one is cured of it. Many people have been bedbound in pain for decades. It really is a life sentence, and sadly, the suicide rate, understandably, is quite high. So put that in juxtaposition with this. There are 0 FDA-approved treatments. There are 0 FDA-approved drugs. The NIH has a budget of $30 billion, and the NIH is renowned for having solved all sorts of complex, important medical diseases. I mean, their mission is to propagate health among the American people. So out of a $30 billion budget, the NIH, for the last many years running, has allocated $5 million to this disease. That is minuscule. It's less than the federal government spends on hay fever. So let me just, a quick comparison with other diseases. The way I think about it is comparing this disease with where, say, autism was 30 years ago, or where multiple sclerosis was 30 years ago. When we were growing up, do you remember this? What was autism? Autism was parents who were cold, the refrigerator mom, the parents who were insufficiently affectionate to their children. That was believed to be the cause of autism. We all know now differently, and frankly, I feel shame that we believed that incorrect information about such a serious and debilitating disease. Multiple sclerosis 30 years ago was a disorder of the nerves and insecurity. Those who suffered must have had some trauma in their childhood and frankly just really didn't want to get well. That was common belief about MS even 30 years ago. My older brother grew up with what we would all clearly now recognize as dyslexia and ADHD and Asperger's syndrome, and he had multiple other neurological problems. But as we grew up, he was relentlessly taunted, bullied, because none of these conditions was understood. And it was heartbreaking to live through that. It's awful to have chronic diseases, and many of us, understand chronic diseases now at this point in our lives. But there is a special kind of hell reserved for people who have a disease before our culture and medical profession understand it. And that's where ME is today. Well, you may wonder why my passion for this is so strong, and it's because, a quick story, about 5 years after we graduated, I got the flu, didn't think much of it. It went on for a week, 2 weeks, and then several months. And I was very slow on the uptake. And it took me a long time to realize that something very different was going on. And I just couldn't figure it out. So I believe in Western medicine. I went to my doctor and was literally just not believed, shunned it aside, told I must just be depressed, and pushed aside. And I, being the persistent person that I am, despite being very sick, went from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor, and every single doctor told me the same thing. So not only was there no hope, there was no affirmation at all that there was really anything wrong with me. So over the course of roughly 4 years, this unexplained thing dominated my life. I was overwhelmingly exhausted all the time, and I had a constant debilitating headache. During the trough of the disease, my goal every day was to summon sufficient energy to get out of bed to take a shower. And that was a challenge. It's hard even now for me to remember that, but I know it was real. Obviously I could not work, and being self-sufficient had always been a driving, important element of my being. So I had no medical diagnosis, I had no treatment, I had no cure. There were certainly many moments of despair, and it was a very humbling time in my life. But over the course of several years, I began to get better. And over the last 25 years, I have essentially, I say I'm 95% cured. I still have some things I have to be very careful about, but I am blessed to have gone on to live a rich and full life. And here's the thing, I mean, I dodged a bullet. I don't know why I got better. The vast majority of people with this illness do not get better, ever. So my experience with this disease is quite unusual. I could just as easily have been Nancy. I could just as easily have been in bed for 30 years. And there are so many Nancys. So, about 2 years ago, I had one of those dazzlingly wonderful life experiences. I learned that the largest national organization on ME research was looking for a new CEO, and the hair on the back of my neck went up. I lost it. And I've been in this job now for 2 years at the Solve MECFS initiative with a very strong staff and a strong board. And in this position, I am rocked with despair when I talk regularly to those who suffer without hope. I am frustrated by the needless suffering, the lack of federal research funds, and the scorn from those who believe that those who suffer are simply slackers. I'm deeply gratified to raise funds to lobby the National Institutes of Health. I was there last week, and also to lobby Congress there last week. I'm honored to be part of an organization that's built the largest patient registry and biobank for this disease, so that other researchers anywhere in the world who have credible research plans can get their research started more quickly using our samples in our biobank. And of course, I'm most proud to actually conduct research, medical research into understanding this disease. So what's interesting is that this has gone on obviously for a long, long time. But I think that we are now at a tipping point, and I'll tell you why. I mean, number one is this report. This is irrefutable evidence for anyone who cares to think about it. You know, anyone who now jokes about it, believes, oh, I'm tired too, and puts it aside, really has chosen to be ignorant. Credible media coverage has grown. There was a story in the New York Times. I had a letter to the editor of the New York Times in the spring. The Washington Post has covered it in the November Atlantic Monthly, at least the online version. There's a long story about this disease. And here's the killer. We know what's going on with medical technology, right? I mean, enormous strides have been made, often using big data models. And there are so many patients with this disease. And we have a biobank and we have information that with sufficient funding, we are prepared to use all kinds of modern medical techniques to attack this problem. And just by the way, you know, when you can put aside the enormous suffering, the human toll of this disease, it's really one of the last major complex Western diseases about which very little is understood. Very little. We really don't even understand the basic underlying causes of this illness. So it's a fascinating, complex scientific challenge. We just need the funds to do the work that we know how to do. And in this disease, sadly, we are building from such a low base of funding that every gift has significant incremental impact. So that's what I really came here to say. And I really struggled with this next part of it because I was not, because I was uncomfortable making a pitch. And so my good friend Beth, who often bails me out, said to me, Carol, here's the deal. You got to make a pitch, and I'll match any gifts from this organization, from our class. Anyone in our class, you two on the online, up to $50,000. And so I put that out there. My enormous gratitude to Beth for being willing to put forward that challenge to all of us. So once Beth told me that I had no choice, I have to make the case. and I honestly hope I've made a case for it. You know, really, anyone who funds this is being part of a visionary group of people who know that early research money matters. And this disease is now at a tipping point, and the early money is the important money. I mean, imagine being one of the people who had the vision to invest in ME research in the 1970s, or had the vision to invest in autism research in the 1990s, who didn't believe the prevailing understanding about the disease. So, meanwhile, I send my thoughts to Nancy. Nancy, we think of you, I think of you often, and I think of the millions who suffer needlessly. This disease can be solved. We do very gratifying work. We're really righting a wrong to end needless suffering. I have additional information about our organization here, and I would be delighted to talk with any of you today or later about this. And thank you so much to my good friend Beth, and thanks to you all.